Parents use many techniques to teach their kids. Most of us picture ourselves parenting in a Danny Tanner style and doing things just like they do on Full House, where everything is scripted perfectly, everyone is calm, and there's a grand resolution what everybody agrees on, and then they hug it out and they move on and they try and do better. But in the real world, we know that parenting isn't as cookie cutter as it is in Full House, and most of us are just trying to do our best and get by. Everyone has their own ways of disciplining their kids. Some common solutions are to ground kids, take away their cell phone, or spank them. And these are things that most of us can relate to and have probably experienced with our own parents doing to us, or us using these techniques on our own children. Though most of them are effective in getting your kids to listen and obey you in a quick form, in a short-term manner, one of these methods can be much more harmful and has quite a few side effects. And this is spanking. A lot of times it's also called corporal punishment, and I will be referring to it in both ways. So today I want to talk to you about how corporal punishment can have serious psychological effects on kids later in life, in their adulthood and in their teen years, and how physical punishment can teach your kids the wrong things that you don't want them to learn, and that there are better ways to discipline them, and I want to share some of those with you and how they can be beneficial to you and your family. So we all want to be the best parents possible, and spanking your child may seem like a quick fix, and usually it will get some compliance right away, but in the end it just leads to more problems, as corporal punishment has psychological effects that most people don't even realize, don't even know about or think about. So corporal punishment has some serious side effects psychologically and mentally. One of them is that when a parent inflicts pain on their child to get them to behave in a certain way, the child isn't going to understand that their behavior is wrong. They're going to hear, or they're going to see that their parent got angry or upset and spanked them, and all that they can think about is that something is wrong with them because they weren't explained usually what they did was wrong. So later on in life, they're going to go into their adulthood thinking that there's something wrong with them. And that's something we really want to avoid. And a lot of people will say that, well, we're good parents, we explain these things, and we use spanking as another form to show them what we feel and how we expect them to behave. But Science Daily has said that spanking, even if it comes from good and loving parents, is associated with an increased probability of subsequent child behavior problems, regardless of culture and regardless of whether it was done by loving and helpful parents. So according to Science Daily, even if you've been explaining things and even if you're very loving outside of that it can still have psychological problems regardless of your culture. Susan Batensky also did a study on it. She studied high schoolers and said that it is stunningly deleterious at every developmental level. She made a list of the side effects that spanking can have on children, and it's quite long, but some of the main ones are aggression, delinquency, antisocial behavior, poor relationships, and impaired mental health. And it can lead to depression later on in life. As you can see, some of these things are very intense and things that we would never want our children to experience. And we never want to inflict this on them, so the best way to do that is to just avoid corporal punishment at all costs and in all possibilities. Even though we may mess up, it's still best to avoid it. So it also teaches your kids the wrong thing about themselves and about the world around them. Family Education said that it teaches your child that violence is an acceptable way to express anger and deal with conflict. This contradicts the rest of how you are trying to raise your child. So spanking your child when you're angry, basically your child's going to make the connection that when I am angry, a good way to deal with this is violence. And that actually ends up to higher crime rates and a higher likelihood of ending up in jail. And there was a study done by the University of New Hampshire by Murray Strauss and said that university students who were spanked by both parents are associated with the greatest increase in criminality for 8 of the 9 criminality measures. So any spanking can lead to higher criminal rates amongst all types of crime and amongst all children. This does not have any impact regardless of race, even though with certain races, spanking is seen as more normal. And so there can be that effect, but it doesn't have anything to do with skin color or culture. It also is more likely that your child will be abusive towards their spouse or submissive towards them if they've been taught that the bigger you are, the more authority and rights you have. So a lot of times they'll either end up becoming abused by their spouse or being the abusive spouse. And so to avoid this, it's not just a good idea to say, no spanking, I don't know how to discipline my kids, and to give up. Of course, we want to incorporate better measures of disciplining our children and teaching them along the way, instead of just spanking them and calling it good. So some of these things that are helpful to discipline your children are to give them consequences that are linked to their behavior. So if your child misses curfew, a good thing to do is to have them come home earlier each week and move their curfew earlier. And you can explain this to your child by saying that their consequence is linked to their behavior. So I have a hard time with you being out late at night, so to make sure that you're home by a certain time, I'm going to move your curfew to 8. And if you don't come home by that time, I will be coming to pick you up. So that's one example of a consequence that you can give them. Another one is to sit your child down and have a talk with them. And of course, this can't be used solely by itself, but it needs to be incorporated with every single time you discipline your child, is to sit them down and explain to them what happened and why it shouldn't be repeated. Psychology Today says that increasing the child's capacity to put words to feelings and actions results in an increased tension regulation, self-awareness, and thoughtful decision-making. So this is not only an effective way of getting your child to behave and listen to you, but it's also going to mentally prepare them for adulthood and handling their emotions. Another one that has been talked about a lot more is positive reinforcement, and this should be done with rarity and focused on actions and not results. So don't reward your kid for a circumstance that they couldn't control. Only reward them for their behavior and actions. So as you can see, corporal punishment has serious psychological effects on your kids and should just be avoided in general. Physical punishment teaches them the wrong things. It teaches them that violence is the answer when it is not. And even if it's something that you are used to, there are more beneficial ways that are easy to learn and can be incorporated as you transition away from corporal punishment. And though many people may say that they turned out fine even though they were spanked, that does not mean that physical punishment is an effective teaching tool. Keep in mind that you're setting them up to succeed later in life, not just behave temporarily, and give them ways to cope with anger that are non-violent. I want each of you to take this to heart and to remember these things, and to talk to your spouse or your significant other about utilizing some of these new parenting techniques instead of spanking, and to tell them about the benefits that you've learned and that you could see from eliminating corporal punishment as one of your forms of discipline. And if you do these things, if you keep working on your communication with your kids and you learn these new forms of discipline, one day you can be just like Danny Tanner on Full House, and you can have those conversations with your kids and reach a resolution that works for all of you.